We're in the midst of the book of Micah, great prophet, Micah Hashem, Micah, who is like God, chapter 3. The Omar. And I said, Shimuna Roshe Yaakov Uktsine Beit Yisrael Alo Lachem Ladat et HaMishpah. I say to the rulers of Jacob, you chiefs of Israel, you should know judgment. You should know what it's right. And we've seen Micah use a lot of times the word Shimu, Shema. Right? If people are listening to you, you don't have to say over it again. Listen, listen, listen. So ne tov ohave ra goes le ora me'alehem she'aram me'al atzmotam. You hate what is good and you love what is evil. Right? You steal the nakedness from people. Right? You're taking everything from upon of their bones. You're completely destroying and taking stuff away from them. This is continuation of his chapter 2, in chapter 2, where he has veered from the Ben Adam Lemakom to the Ben Adam Lechavero, to the problems that the people have in terms of treating of their fellows. V'asher achlu she'er ami v'oram me'alehem hifshitu v'yatzmotehem pitzechu ufarsu kasher basir uchvasar betoch kalachat. You devoured their flesh, you laid their skin off them and their flesh off their bones, and after tearing their skins off of them and their flesh off their bones and breaking their bones to bits, you have cut it up in a pot like a meat in the cauldron. And so this is how terrible you've been in terms of the way that you have treated. You've completely decimated and destroyed and taken everything that you could from the poor, from the hungry. You've done everything that you could to take advantage of them in every way, shape, or form, right? What they were already naked and they were already empty and they were already, and you just went further and further and just took everything you can, you leaders. Someday these people will cry out to God, but they will not be answered at the time, because God will be hidden because of the wrongs that they have done. Obviously, it's not referring to the people who are taking advantage. It's talking about the leaders. We know that, right? Back in the Torah, if you take a pledge, clothing is a pledge from somebody who owes you money, you have to return it back to him at the end of the day. And the Torah says there, if you don't give it back to him, the person might cry out to God and complain. Hey, he doesn't have his shirt to sleep. How is he supposed to stay warm? And God will hear it. So this is not the person who's poor is being taken advantage of. These are these leaders who are not listening. Okay. Ko amar, in verse 5. Ko amar Adonai al neviim hamatim et ami hanoshchim b'shineim v'karu shalom v'asher lo yiten al piev v'kitshu alav milchama. So we started with talking about the rulers, and now we talk about the prophets. These are not the contemporaries of Micah, Yeshaya, and Amos, and Hosea. These are other prophets. These are prophets who lead people astray, who say, shalom, peace, everything's going to be fine. Right? But what they do is anybody who denies what they say, they start a war against them, right? Anybody who denies what their prophecies of everything's going to be fine, when Hosea and Amos and Yeshaya and Micah are saying that things are not going to be fine, they start a war, right? They're misleading the people that everything's going to be fine, no problems, no worries, you don't have to repent, you don't have to do anything right. Lachein laila lachem michazon v'chashcha lachem miksom uva hashemesh al neviim v'kadar aleim hayom. So you should know that, right? Your prophecy, it's going to be like night, right? It's going to be dark. It's not going to come true. The sun will set on these prophets. The days will darken. What they think is light is really darkness. They won't see the truth. Uvoshu achozim v'chafru hakosmim v'yatu al safam kulam ki ein ma'ana Elohim. The seers will be shamed, and they're right. Those who are mediums, they'll be surprised. Their lips will be covered. God will not respond to them. But I'm filled with the strength of the Spirit of God, and I have the courage to tell Yaakov and to tell Yisrael what he has done wrong. Okay, that's the second piece of people. Now we get to the third piece of people here in verse 9. Shimuna zot roshei beit Yaakov k'tzinei beit Yisrael mitavim mishpat ve'et kol ha'yishara ya'akeshu. So now you rulers of the house of Jacob, the chiefs of the house of Israel, who hate justice. And what do? Everything that is supposed to be mishpat, everything that's supposed to be yashar, everything that's supposed to be straight, you akeshu. You make it crooked. So, right, so we started here. We had in the beginning of the chapter, it seemed like we were talking about the rulers, and then we were talking about the prophets. And here again, maybe we're talking about the rulers. We'll also talk about the priests. There's sort of three different groups of people, three different times here, or three different small statements that are said by Micah as to what the people are doing wrong. So in verse 10, Bonet Sion bidamim v'Yushalayim be'avla. What do these people do? They build Sion, Yerushalayim, through crime, through blood, and with sins, with avel, with iniquity. Rosheha b'shochad yishpotu v'choneh b'mechir yorun v'yeh b'kesav yikasum. V'al Adonai yisha'enu le'mor halo Adonai b'kerbenu l'tovenu alei hara. Rulers judge, right? They judge, but they judge for shochad, for gifts, for bribery. The priests give a ruling for a fee. You pay them for what, and then they tell you what they want to hear. And the prophets, what do? They'll tell you what God says, sort of, obviously not truthfully, when you pay them. So here again, like I said, there were three sort of different police, three different groups. And but what happens in the end? You rely upon what they're saying. You're not worried about it. Why? Because God is with us. Nothing bad is going to happen to us. And that's a theme we've seen in different prophets. I like to quote ways back when it was Heichal Hashem, Heichal Hashem, Heichal Hashem. The Jews saying the temple can't be destroyed. This is the temple of God. Nobody can come destroy them. But that's not correct. We have these three groups. And there's in verse 12, we're told what's going to happen. Lachein biglalchem. Tzion sadeh techaresh. Yerushalayim iyin tihiyeh. Har habayit levamot ya'ar. Here is the dooming words of the prophet Micah. And he's probably the first one to say this. We've had many prophecies, because it's believed that Micah is maybe a younger contemporary, again, of Hosea, Amos, and Yeshaya. But really, the prophecies of doom of the northern kingdom have been said. But we haven't really heard prophecies about the destruction of Yerushalayim and the Beit HaMikdash. And that's what Micah says here. Zion will be plowed as a field. Yerushalayim will become heaps of ruin. And the Temple Mount, a shrine in the woods, it's going to be, right? It's going to be empty. The woods are going to grow. Nature's going to take over. Complete destruction is going to happen to Yerushalayim. This is what Micah says here to the Jewish people. It probably was not very well received, one might imagine. He says nobody wants to listen to what anybody has to say about this. Nobody wants to hear what they tell the prophets to be quiet. And so Micah here is saying that destruction is going to come. And he's probably the first one. And I said earlier when Shmuel was asking me this question that Micah is a very effective prophet. How do we know he's such an effective prophet? Well, if you turn to the 26th chapter of the book of Yirmiyahu, the 26th chapter of the book of Yirmiyahu, like many of the chapters of the book of Yirmiyahu, Yirmiyahu is telling the Jewish people that the Beit HaMikdash is going to be destroyed. And he says to them, right, mend your ways and act properly, and perhaps God will renounce the punishment, right? And this is when they want to kill him. And he says, do what you want with me. It's God's decision ultimately, but just know if you put me to death, then, they will only show further the guilt of this city. And this is Yirmiyahu. This is, let's say the year, I don't remember the exact year, 600, 595, whatever it is. Few years before the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash, and they want to kill Yirmiyahu. And some of the officers say Yirmiyahu doesn't deserve to die. Again, this is the 26th chapter of Yirmiyahu. He spoke to us in the name of God. And some of the elders of the land, they get up and they say, and this is from Yirmiyahu 26:18. Some of the elders, right? They're those who want to lynch Yirmiyahu, want to kill him because he's saying Yerushalayim is going to be destroyed, and all these other false prophets are saying, no, everything's going to be fine. Echal Hashem, everything's going to be fine. And these elders get up and they say, and again, I'm reading from Yirmiyahu now 26:18. Micha hamorashti hayani bei bimei Chizkiyahu melech Yudah. Vayomer el kol am Yehuda lemor ko amar Adonai tzvot Zion sadet hacharaish. Yerushalayim iyim tiyeh v'har habayit levamot ya'ar. Micah, the Morash, Micah, our Micah, he got up, and what did he say during the time of Chizkiyahu? He said, Zion's going to be plowed, Jerusalem's going to become heaps of ruins, the Temple Mount, the shrine it will a Temple Mount will become a shrine in the woods. Exactly what we just read, Micah 3:14, the last verse in our chapter. And they say, continuing verse 19, did Chizkiyahu and all of you to kill Micah? Is that what they did to him? Hello, Yareyat Hashem. They feared God. What happened during the days of Chizkiyahu? They listened to the warning of Micah, and they repented. So what? How can we do such a thing? And and he goes on there, and he said there were others who didn't listen to the prophet, etc., etc. So there are two things. Interestingly, we see here that in the book of Yirmiyahu we quote Micah, and so Micah seems to be the first one, like I said, the first one to say Jerusalem's going to be destroyed, the Beit HaMikdash is going to be destroyed. But we see something here that's even more fascinating. When we think of who were the great kings of Israel, right? We know from the book of Melachim, the barometer is David. And all the kings of Yehuda, not the kings of Yisrael, the kings of Yisrael have the barometer, the measuring stick is low, it's Yeravam. But the kings of Yehuda, the measuring stick is high, it's David. You have to be as great as David. And most of them fail. They're not even close to as great as David. But two of them, towards the end of the Sefer Melachim, are very great kings, Chizkiyahu and Yoshiyahu. And Chizkiyahu, we're told, is really a great king. But what we see here is maybe in the beginning of his days, Chizkiyahu was not yet a great righteous king. His father Achaz was not a great king, was a wicked king. There was destruction and death and killing and idolatry during his time period. And maybe when Chizkiyahu first took over, maybe he was not knowing any better, following somewhat of the ways of his fathers. Until a great prophet, Micah, from Moreshet Gat, as he's often understood, Miricha Morashati, gets up and warns Bnei Yisrael, warns the people of Yehuda, that just like that northern kingdom is either in the process or soon going to be destroyed, and the Assyrians' heavy hand is coming down upon them, the same things are going to happen. Jerusalem is going to be plowed down. The temple is going to be, the Jerusalem is going to be ruins. The temple is going to be empty. It's going to be a shrine in the woods. Nature, there's going to be nobody living here. Trees are going to take over. And what happens is Chizkiyahu and the people of Jerusalem repent. And at least for 100+ years, 120 years, I can't tell you the exact amount of years, 130 years, the temple remains alive. Jerusalem remains the capital of the Jewish people. And so this chapter where Micah says something which seems radical and outlandish and far to believe is a prophecy that is believed. And one could say it may be one of the most important prophecies. It may be a prophecy that really charges and challenges Chizkiyahu, and Chizkiyahu listens, and he turns away from the idolatry and destruction of his father, and starts an incredible revival of tshuva. One that, by the way, we'll see it more in Divrei Yamim than we saw in Sefer Melachim. There are many Jews from the northern kingdom who, during the time period of Chizkiyahu, come down from the northern kingdom to the southern kingdom, to the kingdom of Yehuda, to join Chizkiyahu in his avodat Hashem, in his service of God that we haven't seen for some time when Chizkiyahu comes to power. So this chapter, short chapter, is maybe one that is one that's not known. There are other verses in Micah that are much better known. We'll get to the one that's much better known later in the book. But this chapter is a very significant chapter, which is only known well when we look at Yirmiyahu chapter 26, and we see the success of Micah with his prophecy in this chapter, and as a result, ultimately, Chizkiyahu repents, Bnei Israel repents, the Assyrians do not take over Yerushalayim, and at least for a time period, the children of Yehuda and those in Yerushalayim remain secure within its borders with the Beit HaMikdash, again, thanks to Micah and his courage to stand up and say what is needed.